My name's Alex Morrison. I'm one of the non-exec directors at ICRA. I'm delighted to introduce this second panel, which I hope I will enjoy as much as I did the first. I thought it was really excellent. In this second panel, we're going to push forward into the interface between print and digital a little more. It's already come up, but I think this session will explore it in more detail. So it's called Revisiting and Digitalising, or what is the raisonné in the contemporary context. And I'm going to hand over to Frances Fowle, who's going to chair it.
First of all, how much I enjoyed the first session. Lots of ideas came up which I think relate to our session when we're going to be moving on to thinking more about digital. And it's interesting, things like the ANAE portal, the Yale portal, which obviously is an important resource for making printed versions more widely available. And as I was just chatting in the breaks, students are getting lazier and lazier. They do go to libraries, but they do like to be able to find everything online, and then they print it out. So that's how they get hard copy. Anyway, just to say that Andrea Rose was going to chair this session, and sadly she's snowed up in the Pennines. So quite unbelievable, really. So I've filled in at the last moment. And so I was technically going to be one of the guests. Could we have the first slide? Because what I wanted to do was... Oh, I'm doing it. No. Oh, it's here. Sorry. Gosh, I'm in charge. There we are. OK. So the idea is for us to introduce ourselves, first of all. I can quickly introduce everybody. I've got, here on my right, I've got Giovanna Bertazzoni, who's chairman of Christie's Europe. On my left, I have Sebastiano Barassi, who is head of collections and programs at the Henry Moore Foundation, and on my immediate left, David Grosz, who is editorial director and chief digital officer at Cahiers. So the idea is that we're going to have a conversation. I will pose a few questions, and we'll kind of think about various issues associated with the move towards digital. I thought I'd introduce myself just quickly. I was, for many years, senior curator at the National Galleries of Scotland, and in the course of working there, I worked on the catalogue of the French paintings. This was something which was conceived in 2002. We actually got Leverhulme funding for it, and I remember one of the conditions of the funding was that it should be produced digitally in 2002. Well, the hard copy came out last year in 2 volumes, and there is no digital version, so it's still very much wedded to the print. But it has not sold several thousand copies. Unfortunately, it's only sold, barely up to 100, I would think. So this is one of the disadvantages, let's say, of the printed version, especially if it's a collections catalogue. I've also been associated with in my capacity as a curator, with the Van Gogh Worldwide project, and the new digitised Degas catalogue raisonné. And I just wanted to mention those because these are fantastic digital projects which are purely digital. They have no printed equivalent. Apart from, I suppose you could say that the Van Gogh Museum itself has republished their own collection catalogues, and they're available on the website. So just a couple of things about the research process and our kind of decisions about what we include and what we didn't include in the catalogue. One of the discoveries that we made was this wonderful X-ray on the back of one of our Van Gogh pictures of a self-portrait, which was revealed to the world, and then quickly the institution shut it down. And so it doesn't appear in the Van Gogh Worldwide catalogue, not yet anyway. And so this is one of the things, actually, one of the issues associated with digitisation. It's about who owns the copyright, who owns who has ownership of the work of art itself, and how they make decisions about what's available. And the other thing that came up or just another example of what came up during the course of research was this fake Manet. So normally in a catalogue raisonné of an individual artist, you wouldn't include a fake. We will discuss this, but we obviously do include something like that in a catalogue of a collection. So one of the things I wanted to think about during the process, during this discussion, is how we, in this digital age, is the title catalogue raisonné, is it adequate? So we'll come to that question kind of later on. But I'll pass on to Sebastiano, first of all, to introduce himself.
Thank you. So, Sebastiano Barassi, I'm head of collections and programs at Henry Moore Foundation. I've been there since 2012, and I head the department that oversees all research activities around Henry Moore, including the continuation of the catalogue raisonné. The foundation was created by Henry Moore himself in 1977, so just less than 10 years before he died. With the main objective of securing his own legacy and to promote the appreciation of the visual arts. So, and in terms of his legacy, the catalogue raisonné is obviously a very important element. One of the big advantages that we have today is that we inherited from Moore himself published catalogue raisonnés of his sculpture, his drawings, and his graphics. So virtually all of his creative output was catalogued in his lifetime, or at least the cataloguing was planned in his lifetime and then completed shortly after he died. And in fact, Moore himself created the first version of the catalogue raisonné as early as 1944. So you can already imagine how his foresight led to the catalogue raisonné being really core to the activities of the foundation once it was set up, because Moore himself understood the significance of having a complete record of his creative output as early as that. So over the next 80 years now, many versions of the catalogue raisonné have been created, and now we have moved towards a fully digital version of the catalogue. Now, the where we are on the debate of print versus digital, I think we're in quite a unique position of having done both. So in a sense, we feel that we've done the catalogue in print, and now the next step, the natural next step feels it should be the digital version. And with that in mind, I think we are really exploiting the potential of the materials that Moore gathered in his lifetime, because on top of cataloguing the work, he also kept records of virtually all of his activities, from correspondence to exhibition catalogues, casting records, sales records, and so on. So all of these materials are now feeding into the enhancement of the basic records that were initially published in the catalogue. And yes, so from our perspective now, having published catalogues in print in a fairly basic format, so essentially kind of title, date, medium, dimensions, and provenance and exhibition histories were available. We're now moving towards a vision, at least, not quite a finished product, but a vision where all the materials that we have been digitizing, including an archive that includes more than 1 million items, is going to be feeding into the catalogue raisonné. So in an ideal record, you could cross-reference correspondence, sales records, and all the other materials that we have, including historical exhibition catalogues, and also create new exhibition records.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So I'm going to pass on immediately to David. Oh, sorry, do you want the microphone?
No,
sorry,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks. All right, thanks very much. So I am David Grosz. I'm editorial director at Cahiers Art Institute. We are a publisher of catalogue raisonné. Our primary focus is digital CRs, but we also do books. So we've published 8 digital CRs so far. The two best known are for Agnes Martin and LeWitt wall drawings. We will be publishing books under our own imprint, but we're also digitizing books, and we're starting with these 3. We have 2 volumes of Ellsworth Kelly and 1 of Frank Gehry, and these were originally published by our affiliated organization, Cahiers d'Art France. So we are Cahiers d'Art Institute. We have a number of catalogue raisonnés that are in progress. 2025 should see the publication of I think, 3 new digital catalog raisonné. We will have a catalog of 2-dimensional works by Tunga. We will have Ufan sculpture and Robert Irwin installations. Finally, and what I think is most important for this panel, I want to explain that we often become involved in catalog raisonné projects at early stages in their development. So we are a publisher, but we also can help with research, project management, editing, and organizing catalog raisonnés. And on top of that, we provide a software platform that a research team can use as they compile their information, and which then creates the eventual online catalog raisonné. So I think the perspective that we can bring to this discussion comes from having seen several different sides of catalog raisonné production, and also having seen a range of different catalog raisonnés, each of which has its own goals and challenges.
Great, thank you very much. So now I'm going to pass on to Giovanna.
So I'm Giovanna Bertazzoni. I'm the chairman of Christie's Europe. I have been at Christie's for 27 years yesterday. So I'm delighted to celebrate here. I was actually for 26 and a half of these 27 years in the Impressionist and Modern Art department, going through every job and doing all my career there. I'm a specialist. I say it with a certain pride. It's important to remember why we're there, so it was a change, and it was a big leap of faith to move on to become a suit. But I still believe I'm a specialist, and I am a specialist suit. Let's put it this way. But it's a great job, and I'm delighted to have now basically a chairmanship position and an executive position in an institution that is changing a lot. And when I started, women couldn't wear trousers, so it's actually quite interesting to be in a place of more visibility. I'm an end user. I'm of a catalogue raisonné. I started as a cataloguer, so I really used the catalogue raisonné day in, day out, any form of it, worshipped it, was mad at it, loved it, all sorts of reactions. But it's our bread and butter, it's our day, and legally, it's the alpha and the omega of a lot of our decisions. So it's particularly interesting to be talking today as an end user. And I have to say one more thing. We thought a lot about today, and it's not only me coming with opinions, but we have a little group. We're all here. Letizia Treves joined from the National Gallery a little while ago, Christie's, as a head of research for the classics department, and it's essential to have that scholarship and methodology with us. Maria Morando, who's the head of expertise for the Impressionist and Modern Art department, has been part of this thinking group. Jeanne Rigal is following us online, and she heads everything that is, again, expertise globally for our department. So it's not only me speaking, it's what we came up with brainstorming together.
Excellent. Thank you. That's brilliant. Okay, so I thought we'd just, first of all, just have a kind of free-flowing discussion about the pros and cons of the shift from print to digital. So you've got direct experience of producing both. But I think, David, you said that you work primarily in digital. What do you see as the kind of pros and cons?
Okay, I think the advantages of books are pretty obvious. I mean, they're beautiful, they're pleasurable. And I think that they do imply greater authority, although hopefully that is something that is changing and will continue to change. I think for digital, I can say that when I started doing digital catalog raisonné, I thought that the advantages would be that you could update, you could edit them, and then all of the sort of digital tools. I mean, the flexibility of databases, search, multimedia, et cetera. I think what I've discovered is that there's also a huge advantage to the flexibility that digital publishing allows. And I think that a lot of the new models that have developed and that we'll be discussing here come about because of because of that flexibility. I mean, on the previous panel, it was discussed how the expense of creating a book is kind of a limiting factor. And so digital does free us up from that in some really interesting ways.
Although there are a lot of costs involved.
There are costs involved. There's no question that doing digital catalogs is expensive. And you also have to think about the maintenance of the catalog after its initial publication. But you don't have a single moment to publish it. So you're not sort of constrained by this one moment where, I mean, yes, some catalog raisonnés as books have been reprinted, but most of them are not like the Rothko. Most of them are a single edition. There's a single opportunity to do it. And that also creates a certain kind of pressure, I think, for the people compiling it as well. So there's a lot of freedom that just comes from not having that one moment that you're tied into.
Yeah, I can see that. So Sebastiano, I imagine that relates to what you're doing with the Henry Moore catalogue, that you're kind of doing it in stages, or how does it work?
So, well, we have now digitized all the catalogues that were published in print. So we have online a full record of all the existing catalogues, and then we keep adding information when it becomes available. We do these in two different ways. One is our own internal research, but more importantly, we run a service which is, I guess, equivalent to an authentication service, although we're not allowed to call it authentication for largely legal reasons. But it is essentially, we call it a review and research system, which means that people submit information to us, which we review for inclusion in the catalogue raisonné. So this is particularly important when it comes to edition works, because whereas I mean, I'm not talking about graphics and prints, but more the sculptural side of Moore's practice, because in the catalogs in print, each edition was represented by one record, whereas now we can we have what we call a summary record for the edition, and then individual records for each cast. And that's obviously something that is constantly moving, so we need to keep updating that regularly. But for our own internal purposes, I think the flexibility of digital has many benefits, apart from the obvious ones that have already been mentioned. I think there's a question of being able to use that data set for other purposes as well. So the catalogue raisonné also includes our collection, for instance. So our collection database and the catalogue raisonné database are one and the same. Well, they're not the same thing, but our collection is included in the catalogue. For when you create digital guides or website experiences, you can use those existing records for them. And then there's a question of keeping it fresh. And I think unlike a book, just for my own education, I went back to look at various copies of and editions of the catalogue in print, and I think one of the things that's immediately striking is how much of their time they look, which is not a bad thing, but in terms of an end user experience, I think to be able to change the feel of the catalogue to respond to the needs of the users and the expectations, something that feels much easier to do digitally than in print. And finally, there's the question of adopting new technologies as they become available. So, for instance, geolocation for us is something that can play a big part, because we have for many years had on our website what we call Henry Moore Works in Public, which is essentially a map of the world with all of the Henry Moores on public display. And that can be highly enhanced. I mean, it's already evolved enormously in the 12 years it's been online, actually more than 12 years. But now we can add new features to that because of new technologies that become available. So that constant evolution of the infrastructure, I guess, makes it.
Do you actually offer a kind of feedback service? I mean, if someone goes online, can they feedback to you, and then you can kind of respond?
Feedback on
So feedback on how the catalogue raisonné is working for them, how the end user is working for the end user?
We do to an extent. It's not as extensive as I would like it to be for now. It's a question of resources, as always.
As always.
But it's certainly something that we want to
Yeah.
to build into our practices.
Interesting. And as an end user yourself, Giovanna?
So end user and the point of view of the market, because
Yeah, of
clearly
course,
this
yeah.
is what I bring forward today. So pros, the catalogue, digital catalogue raisonné is alive versus static. To us, this is really the most important thing, which means that it's affordable, more affordable. Again, you know, we as we look at that a lot, more democratic, sustainable. We haven't talked about that, but you know, sustainable. You know, there's much less paper involved, and it. Most important thing, reaches more people and diverse audiences, younger people, especially when you're talking about old masters, when you're talking about 19th century. I mean, the fact that it does reach a demographic that actually doesn't look at books anymore is very important to us. And also geographically, in terms of like the global aspect, is also essential. The obsession we have is that we continue to be relevant in a global way, and we go deep in terms of age, but we go really wide in terms of the world, because who cares about Impressionism otherwise anymore? I mean, aesthetically, okay? So we need to reach audiences that actually do still care. I do deeply, but you know, we need to make sure that more people do, and they like it, they appreciate it, they understand how radical it was, and that is a catalogue raisonné also online, that it doesn't, because otherwise, you know, my son doesn't even have a book in a house full of books, you know, and you know, he's 19, so what are we going to do? But the most important thing is that it's open and alive, and one thing that is really relevant to us is this digging deep, this constant possibility of like having hyperlinks and connecting you to other ideas, and maybe an inspiring drawing that is not by the same artist, but it's connected to that, and it's explaining an altar piece, and you know, so that kind of like digging is really important to us. Talking about that, and this is a whole chapter per se, and maybe not opening now, but the main issue we have is how do we know when there is a correction, when something is changed. And that's really something that I think we discussed, you know, at the very first conference. Us as market end users, we really need updates. And we need to have updates in a way that we will have to sit down all together. The next conference is going to be about updates and find a way, brainstorming together how we find a way to make it not taxing on all of you, and at the same time easily accessible for us. Because if we are going to print, if we are cataloguing, and we don't know constantly what's changed, and it could be a comma for number one, or a whole attribution, or a new line of provenance that actually is dangerous from a restitution point of view. So clearly there are changes that are minor, changes that are substantial, radical material. So to us, even just having a memo or a sort of newsletter at the end of every 2 weeks, which is our job to go and consult, where we have the list of like items that have changed, and it's our job to go see it's a comma, it's a point, it's a period, or it's something altogether super important. It's important. We need to think of ways that are not too difficult for, you know, already these people that have to, sometimes with very little money, help us, and to us kind of like having to go through the whole, for instance, like Cézanne, catalogue raisonné. There are some changes all the time. That's a digital catalogue in the addenda to Chapuis and to Rewald. But we don't know what's changed. So it could be really difficult for us. So that's one thing in the Viva the digital. Yeah. Cons, I'm a like myself, so and I'm a book person myself, and there is a whole generation that actually, we said before, the panel before said it wants the printed book, and I agree with everything that has been said before, that actually having a book in one's hand is actually the way of understanding an artist. During the pandemic, when we were locked down, we had a project that we called Fahrenheit, 2 days before March 20th, when we all went home in London, we asked ourselves, what are we going to do with research? How are we going to communicate between each other, for the next future? We didn't know how long we would be locked down. So we each became a book. That's why Fireman. And we kind of divided all the catalogue raisonnés between the teams, and everybody had to take home some of them. And Degas and Gauguin were at the end of my bed, all of them. But then, you live and breathe these books, and I completely understand the value of having the printed books, because then we had a list and everybody knew I was the guy in Gauguin and someone else was Beckman and someone else, and we could, if we were receiving an image, we were writing to these people and saying, hey, what's in it, and is it in a catalogue raisonné? So I was spending every day for everybody in the globe going through Degas and Gauguin, and I loved that. I really had that line in the sand, a sense of that was a capsule in time, everything we said before, but it was very finite. So again, it's a generation, and we are not the future, and we need to think that, we need to make it different.
So I'm sure that will maybe raise some questions at the end, but I wanted to move on now to the idea of scholarship and reception. Because this is a tricky thing when we talk about, we've talked already about authenticity in relation to catalogue raisonné. But I wanted to ask Sebastiano, do you think a print version of a catalogue raisonné still has more kind of authority, has more kind of gravitas than a constantly evolving digital version?
I think, it partly depends on the end user of the catalogue. And what it is that they're looking for, and why they're using the catalogue. It also, I think this points to questions around the changing nature of scholarship and how the digital world is affecting more traditional ways of researching. So from my perspective, I feel that the accessibility of a digital publication overrides most other considerations. The authority of that publication, I think, is now less determined by the medium in which it is created and disseminated, and more by the authority or perceived authority of the editor. So it's really about who is publishing this information rather than is it in print or in a book. Certainly a book feels more like the summation of a particular individual's research over a specific period. And in some ways, I think what is going to become interesting, we see it because we, as I said earlier, as a foundation, we're slightly ahead of the curve in the sense that our catalogue raisonné started life about 80 years ago. So there is now a question of the history of the catalogue raisonné. And of course, with a live digital resource, you don't really, unless you start archiving digitally every version of the catalogue. But it's a lot easier to study a published book than it is a live website, of course. And so to study and consider the evolution of a project over a long period is something that is harder to do with a digital catalogue. But overall, I feel that the authority of the catalogue does depend on the perception of who is creating it.
Who created it, yeah. So if it's a kind of group of people, that's more problematic, isn't it? Whereas we've got individuals behind a catalogue, then you're kind of targeting that individual to a certain extent. I wonder, David, have you had much critical reception for your digital catalogue raisonné? I mean, so this thing, if you produce an actual book, yes, someone will review it in the Burlington magazine in this country. But what sort of critical reception have you had for your?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's been some, but I think there's no question it's not publishing a book. It's not in reviews. There have been in library journals and things like that some reviews, but not in more mainstream publications. I mean, on this question of authority, I think there is a perception that books have more authority. I think that's changing. I think that's just sort of historical, it's just the legacy of how we perceive different publication types. I totally agree with the question about the fact of the authority really coming from the authorship of the book. I think another issue that the digital catalogs have to face as far as authority goes, and this goes to your point, is about the question of updates. And so I think it's very important for digital catalogs to be very transparent about their methodology, not just the methodology of compiling the information, but the methodology of updating. And so we do have, in all of our catalog raisonné, we have an update page, and we are both, we for each catalog, it's laid out what its sort of updating criteria and methodology is, and then there's a list of the significant updates. And it very explicitly says we do not update if we correct a comma, but we do if it sort of is above this threshold. But I think from the authority question, I think being very clear about that is going to be very important going forward.
Do you have anything to add on that? No? We'll move on then, because I think I've got quite a few questions and the time will run out, I can tell. So there has been a suggestion that we should invite the scholarly commentary from the wider public. Do you think this is a dangerous idea, or do you think it's a good idea? I mean, that would probably include, it would include, obviously, auction houses.
So we were pretty divided about this. On the one side, again, goes back to the openness concept. If it is open, it's open. But catalog raisonnés online are not Wikipedia. We really came to this kind of very clear conclusion. We need to avoid cacophony. We need to avoid this, the more we invite dissent or comments, or especially in a Weltanschauung like the present, in terms of information, which is so polarized and visceral and sometimes so aggressive in the way that opinions are expressed. So we also care about, and that to us is the most important, the sanctimonious element of the ownership, and if there is this ownership and it's such a responsibility, the person having this ownership also has to be protected, because it's very violent otherwise and discouraging almost as an endeavor, as a responsibility to be out there with your opinion. So these are all our questions about opening up.
So actually, perhaps moving on to this idea of ownership, a question for David. How do publishers such as Cahiers d'Art, for example, how do you see your role in shaping the future of catalogue raisonné as kind of gatekeepers for works to be included? And do you feel, are you concerned about your kind of legal responsibilities in relation to what you publish?
Okay, let me, I don't think that we're gatekeepers for the most part, other than, I guess, the simple fact if someone comes to us with something that clearly is not a catalogue raisonné, we shouldn't publish it as a catalogue raisonné. I think that our role is more as kind of a guide and partner. So I think we have knowledge of the practicalities of creating these. We have also seen a lot of catalogue raisonné from, over their entire lifespan. So and that means we've seen a range of different challenges, which I think you could put them, very broadly speaking, in two buckets. One I'd call cataloging challenge, and one challenges what the other we'll call organizational challenges. So cataloging challenges are what's the nature of the work and what's the nature of the available information. And then organizational challenges, budgets, timelines, personnel, expectations, and all the rest. So we are able to work with catalog raisonné editors and researchers. We are able to share this wealth of knowledge to help them kind of navigate this path. They're ultimately in charge, and they are the subject experts. So they know the artist, they know the artwork. We can really only help them with that. I think one other thing that I would say is we have a bias toward completing projects. And I think that's a useful discipline to bring to this partnership. As far as legal responsibilities, we have insurance. We ask for authors to have insurance when there are, all the things that came up in the last panel. I mean, we have disclaimers if there are any authenticity issues, and there's a submission process. There are all the legal things in place. We're not. I think that we try and make sure that the process is sound. We're not the arbiter of what works go in and do not go in, though, I would say.
And you shouldn't.
Yeah. No.
I mean, you shouldn't. I mean in a respectful way. Like,
absolutely.
You shouldn't have this burden.
No. I think we deliver this information, but it comes from someone else.
Yes.
So what about you, Sebastiano? Because it's a different situation when you, you have your own collection. Do you think there's a conflict of interest there?
There can be a conflict of interest. I think it needs to be managed very carefully and ethically, I guess. I guess, in some ways, that conflict of interest might have been greater when Moore was still alive, in a sense, because I think recent events, and I'm thinking particularly of Banksy and what's happened around the Pest Control Office, have raised the question, which is quite interesting, of who owns the catalogue and who is in charge of attribution. And I think when an artist is alive, people tend to defer to them, but actually there can be instances where the artist maybe isn't the most reliable source. And we looked at an example earlier of these as well. So yes, and then there's the question of course, funding, I guess, where the conflict of interest might become even greater. That's a difficult one to unravel, and I think that, we probably could be the subject of a whole conference. But I would say that certainly in Moore's case, he had the foresight of creating the resources to support the activities around his legacy, and therefore, he tasked us with that job, and so our priority remains the promotion of Henry Moore and through the catalogue raisonné and by other means. Having said that, in our situation particularly, we also are a grant-giving body, and we have supported the creation of other catalogues. But I guess, we're probably quite unique in that. I don't think there are many other comparable examples, so I don't know how typical we are, or rather, I know that we're not very.
Can I ask a question, a technical one? How much of an advantage is the fact that he didn't cast posthumously? Must be,
Enormous.
I know. I mean, it must.
We thank him almost every day for putting that line in the
so
will.
You must do even more.
Yes, I think he was acutely aware of what happened to other artists like Rodin, like Arp, and he was definitely keen to stop casting because he knew that he could quite easily get out of control. He only allowed the completion of editions that had already been started in his life, and only under the supervision of the Foundation's first director and Moore's wife. After that, there's been no casting at all.
So I have a question for Giovanna, which is about the fact that auction houses obviously rely on catalogue raisonné a great deal for their own work, but often scholars find it difficult to access information from auction houses. So could there be greater reciprocity, is that a word? between auction houses, scholars, and other people who kind of, who are creating these catalogue resonates.
So let's start by saying that I could be very anodyne now and say, and just give the line that it's actually very true and very safe. We don't buy anything, we mediate between buyers and sellers, we represent the sellers actually, and the condition of anonymity and discretion is paramount. It's a legal point that not only about GDPR, but this is our raison d'être, okay? So we shan't forget that. But it's an anodyne answer, and I'm aware that, everybody then thinks, okay, well, go a little bit deeper because this is a meeting of scholars and brainstorming. So I would like to reframe actually the question and say, and put forward what we do already in terms of reciprocity and how there is already a very strong sense of commitment to a lot of non-sale activity. And I don't want you to frown, it's true, how much we dedicate at the moment to make sure that there are entire research departments that are constantly thinking about pushing people to loan to museums, invite owners, even the most reluctant, to lend to exhibitions, but also to go deeper. How much, for instance, the whole classics departments devotes time to photographing the back of canvases, producing photos, send photos to everybody who's asking. We have records going back to our very beginning. They're open. There is cost and a whole department that is still never even doubted that there has to be this archive, there has to be a live, that you can come and consult it and come back. We try to constantly invite, for instance, scholars who we know are working on a certain artist to access the work in the collection, to go to stately houses, for instance, where we know that some works are, or that famous Derby moment, to have more of those. We really have this as a mantra. It's really our credo at the moment. It really is there for every single one of us. So I would like to start thinking that there is that as far as we can go. But we have a very strong legal department that is telling us stop, over and over again. So it's moving within this ambiguity. How much can we share? And we don't want to be just asking. There is a doubt this. We want that, and we're aware of it.
Okay. Any comments? So I want to open it up to the audience now, but I just want to leave you with the New York Public Library definition of the catalogue raisonné, which is a comprehensive annotated listing of all known works of an artist, either in a particular medium or all media. So in a digital world, do you think that this is an adequate definition? Or can you think of something that would, especially when you're thinking about what the next session we're going to be thinking about, where we talk about groups of artists or different media, is this an adequate definition, or should we be rethinking the whole that whole kind of area? So, any questions? And if you come, what sort of solution? I can come back to the to the group. Yes, there's a couple of questions over here.
Thank you. So, of course, I'm going to come in from the publishing side and still want the printed version of a catalogue raisonné. But in the ideal world, I think it would be great if they worked in tandem so that we could print and do a digital. We discussed this, I think, at the last ICRA, where the curator from Washington came over. They have been working for many years on the Rothko drawings, which has gone through various people. And the debate goes backwards and forwards. Do they do a printed version first, or do they do a digital version? And it's gone backwards and forwards with the idea that doing it digitally first, it enables new material to come in before going and do the printed one. And indeed, the Mellon, our sister institution, as you know, have got 2 catalogue raisonnés online. and we're constantly being asked for a printed version of it as well. So, as I say, in an ideal world, if the costs worked, it would be great if we had both. There is a question, not just a statement, sorry. We're working, we do distribute for various people. We distribute for Modern Art Press, so we're doing the Lucy and Freud. We're publishing, we're distributing the Modigliani catalogue raisonné with the Institute Restolini later this year. They in turn will go and do a digital. And the idea for that is that then there's so much material that can't go into the printed version, which is already huge, so that when it rolls on, that's great. They can add in all this additional material, which, as you say, my question out of interest for both Sebastiano and David is, your digital catalogue raisonnés, are these free? Because Giovanna says about the ease and the cost or the benefits to students, but the portal is a subscription service. Now, it's great because all the Oxbridge colleges have it, so students have access to it, etc. So in that case, that is wonderful. On the other hand, how do you then recoup your costs if you're not charging? And I'm assuming you do.
And can I just say also that ANAE portal is only accessible to English-speaking
No, that's
students.
expanded.
Has that changed?
Yeah, no, and
has.
this, I mean, the portal only happened because Mellon underwrote the developmental costs, etc., which were huge. And I probably shouldn't say it, but I was sceptical as to whether this was ever going to work. Now, or rather, in financial terms, it has gone through that initial process. They initially just went to English language, so it was for England and America. It then moved over to Australia, and my understanding now is that they are now into Europe as well, which is going to open it up further. But again, it is a subscription service which is having to be paid for, because otherwise the thing doesn't work otherwise. It's the only way. So back to the two gentlemen.
Sure. So yeah, most of our catalogs are available through subscription. We now have one that's available for free, and I mean, technically we can sort of, organize either things, but most of them are for subscription. So that absolutely is a barrier to entry. We offer institutional subscriptions. So universities, museums, other public libraries, other institutions like that will have a subscription, and then anyone can come and access it. So students are not directly paying, but somebody is.
We don't charge for access to the catalogue. It's free for everyone. We have been debating for not so much commercial reason. I mean, we operate as a charity, so our objective is really to support Moore's legacy in the most effective way. So, and we're lucky enough to be able not to have to charge for access. But we have been thinking about limiting or controlling access by password because of copyright issues, and particularly with the rise of artificial intelligence and how it's eating up all the information available online. We are wondering whether there is a need to control access in different, but not for commercial reasons, only for intellectual property reasons.
Yeah, let me actually just say, we primarily work with artists who are still under copyright, and everyone asks about this proliferation of images question. And so the artists have a strange kind of interest in some case in limiting access as well.
Thanks. There was another question at the end.
Hi, thanks. That was really interesting. Mine's a quickish question. How much do you think the order of, so whether it's digital first or print first, affects the opinions on the authority of that information? And is it the sort of cachet around publishing a book that sort of, makes it feel more authentic? And if it is that, how can you provide the same cachet for a digital first catalogue raisonné?
That's a difficult one.
Tough question.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I think the question of the authority of the publication we sort of touched on, and I don't think that is exclusively comes down to, certainly the order of doing these two things. I can't see how that would matter. I I tend to think it would make sense to do digital first and then book in an ideal world. Doesn't always work out that way. I mean, we have a situation we're working with an artist who wants to do both, and they want book first. So we will be accommodating that. I think that the order in which you do things is going to affect what is the digital product and what is the book. But I don't think I can't really see how that affects the cachet, as you're saying. Or the
I guess, I mean, if there wasn't a book, for example, would the digital version have the same gravitas as if it had both? And if it doesn't, how can we improve that to open the possibility for more catalogue raisonnés that are simply digital and potentially cheaper if they were a sort of lo-fi version than what has been produced so far, maybe?
The gravitas is in the information. 99.9% of the gravitas, I mean, from the market point of view, is in the information. The quickness with which a catalogue raisonné is dismissed because it can be considered problematic, even 1, 2, 3 discussed works or fake, this is such a problem for the end users when money is involved that digital, written on a piece of paper, oral, whatever, doesn't matter. You know, at the end of the day, it's the importance, the authority of the voice collating the information, to me. I mean, at least, I don't know if we agree. But I think it's also culturally, I mean, and I don't want to date us, but most of us are boomers here, okay? And we think books, and I'm proud of it, but, you know, we think books. This is a non-issue to our children. You know, there is an enormous gravitas with a Netflix production or a pop-up of an information that appears tomorrow. I mean, this is just a question of us changing our mind, not...
I think you're right.
We have to change our mind because the world is going on. It's really, I think
it's a problem when you have a lot of different versions too. You've got, I mean, for example, Modigliani has like 5 different catalogue raisonnés, and so which one becomes which one has the authority? And same with the Van Gogh catalogue raisonné. There are 2 printed versions. Well, in fact, there are now 3 printed versions and the online version. And really, it's the most recent one, which should be the more reliable. So, in every case, whether it's book or digital. Any other questions? At the back, yes? And then we better stop, actually. Final question.
We've spoken about updating when, for example, there's a change in the scholar's attitude as to whether an artwork's correct or not. So I guess that's talking about adding in new artworks and potentially excluding others. What happens when you have an artist who curates their in essence, de-authenticates? So, for example, prints, or Richter has been known for de-authenticating various of his artworks. Would that fall within the methodology that would be put online for people to see? Does it change? We've been talking about authority of the catalogue raisonnés, whether digital or online or in paper. Does it change kind of the authority and gravitas of them?
Have you come across something similar, David?
No, we haven't directly addressed this. I mean, I think to your question, transparency of methodology is absolutely important for every catalogue raisonné. And so we're a situation, I mean, I haven't directly dealt with that, but I think that were something like that to happen, you would have to explain why and how and when and all of that. And yes, I think that would affect the gravitas of the catalog. So that's a strong argument against doing that.
The bell tolls. I think it's time to wrap up. So I just want to thank this panel. It's been really stimulating. I'm sure there are lots of other questions, perhaps in the break. So thanks again, everyone.